advanced training. And I'm going to teach you how I would keep large groups of kids under control, how to have an effective classroom. When I started teaching, I told before in one of the sessions how I had 19 boys, and that was my training ground for that really got me into children's ministry, was that classroom, because it was a difficult one, but God showed me how to handle it, and it went really, really well. So then I was at this large church where I ended up being the Christian education director there, but we had children coming in. We ended up with 23 buses, Sunday school buses, that went out and loaded up children and brought them to Sunday school, went out again and loaded up the buses again and come back and dropped those kids off and picked up the other ones. So we had a large, large Sunday school. And so when I was teaching, I learned how to handle these brand new kids. These were kids that were off the street, not Sunday school kids. And they came in and they were bringing busloads of them in. And at that time I was in the primary department, which was grades 1, 2, and 3. And 4 as well, I think. And so I had to figure out what to do with all these kids that were coming in, because, you know, the teachers were saying, my classroom's full, don't bring me any more kids, I can't handle all these kids, you know. And I'm going, well, what do I do with them, you know? So anyway, it was my responsibility. I was the leader. I had to figure it all out. What do I do with these kids? And God, when you go to God, He tells you what to do. He helps you. He gives you the ideas. He helps you. You're not alone. And so what happened was, I said, okay, we all have the kids come in for singing in the big room first, and then they go to their classroom. So I said to the teachers, okay, if you will take the children that you have now and you keep them in your classrooms, and right away, so they don't come into the big room for singing, and I will take all the new children that are coming in, and I will bring them into the big classroom and we'll teach them in there. Now, we were having 25 to 30 brand new children every single Sunday. So you can imagine, and back then they didn't have all the big pictures and all the stuff that you have now. And I had to, I really had to work at this. The first week, the children came in and it took us all morning nearly to get their names and addresses. And so I'm thinking, well, this is not working. Every week we've got 25 to 30 new kids, and, you know, we can't keep just, you know, taking the whole classroom to get their names and addresses and so on. So I said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to have a secretary outside the door. I had lots of helpers, thank goodness, a lot of teenagers. Use teenagers, they're great, and they like to be used. And so anyway, I hope you don't mind me going over this, but I just thought this would maybe tie into this to tell you how I manage. Anyway, the secretary was outside the room, and I said, now you take all the names and addresses, and as they come in, then you just let them come into the classroom. And I thought, well, you know, we're going to have somebody tell them where to go. So I put big pictures up on tables. I set up tables with chairs around it, and I put up pictures on each table, at the end of the table, cartoon characters, so that if the children came in, the secretary knew, well, this one is full, so I'll put them in the Charlie Brown classroom. So she said to the kids, now when you go into the classroom, look for the Charlie Brown picture, and that's going to be your table in your classroom. And so that's how we did it. And we learned how to organize to where wasn't confusion, because sometimes in a classroom, if you're not prepared, you have total confusion, and that can be a real problem. So this classroom management today is going to explain some of the things I learned, like making rules, what to do with the small children, older children, teenagers, how to keep them sitting nice and quiet and still. And then our next session after that is games that teach, because games can be so effective in teaching and helping to keep discipline. And the next one after that is music in the classroom. I've got some really nice, I'm going to put up on the website when I do this session the music that I have learned and used for the children that I found very effective, and then how to get them into slow songs, and then how to use sign language with songs. And then the last one is how to teach on a budget. How, if you don't have any visuals, no pictures, no nothing, how do you teach them where they're going to listen rather than just standing up there talking to them? And then putting the lesson together and sample lessons that are effective. Okay, so let's get started. So this is, like I said, these are things that I have learned some of you may not have a facility. For example, if you just have a church with a large room for the adults, then how do you teach the children? You know, because the adults are going to have the whole time. So in Canada, we always had Sunday school before church. So that if you have just one big church with with the pews or chairs or whatever you have there, and so the way that you can do it is have Sunday school before church, so that you have the children have an hour that you have to teach those children before the adults come in. And that way you have a facility inside, because I have found it's very difficult to teach kids outside, because there's too many distractions, you know, for them to be looking here, looking there. And so if that's all you have, then you have to go with that. But you really have to be creative to keep their attention outside. And you have to be, they have to be active and a lot more than if you're inside a building. The other thing you can do, you can have a kids club one night a week and use the church for that. Or a Saturday morning kids meeting, or an after-school program once a week. Or if you have the facilities, then you can have children's church during the adult service if you have another area for the children. But you need to have once a week where children are trained for about an hour, because they will learn a lot in an adult service. But if you really want to reach them, you really need to have a time that is for kids. And I know a lot of you do Vacation Bible School. And that may be just 1 week. You do a whole session the whole week, because that's how we do it in Canada. But the children need more teaching than just Daily Vacation Bible School. So I encourage you to find ways where you can have the building to be able to have one time a week, an hour to teach the kids. But once you get them in there, now what happens is you have teenagers who want to come into the kids area. And so what do you do with them? Well, I find that children, when they get to a certain age, they don't want anything that's kiddish. They will get to a place where they'll say, this is silly, I'm not a kid anymore, and they kind of give you a problem because they're feeling like you're putting them down as a kid and they want to feel like they're an adult. So when that transition comes in their life, if you're not careful, they can really disrupt your class, because everything you're doing, they're frowning and they're going, and they don't like it because it's too babyish for them, or at least they think it is. So once kids get to that stage, then you either have to bump them up to another class higher, or you use them as workers. Because once they feel like they're a worker, then they don't feel like you're teaching them as a kid. They now think that I'm a worker now. So And I always make sure that if I make them workers, I tell them, like, you have to really, be serious, like you're not just going to come in there and fool around, like if you're a worker, and I give them kind of the rules that they have to follow and stuff. But I find that helps a lot to not have children who think it's too babyish for them. I also tell them if you're a worker and there's a kid's song, then you have to do the actions with the kids, like I know that you're older and these songs may be a little young for you, but they're not for you. This is the class for the younger kids. So, you have to enter in. That way you don't get them standing there, like complaining because this is too childish for me. So that's what I would do with teenagers. Toddlers. Toddlers, because they cannot sit for an hour, and even the older kids have to have some, you have to have some action during your class where they're not sitting for a whole hour. But the attention span of a toddler is not very long. So you need to have them in a class of their own. I know that's not always possible, but if you really want to minister to kids and not have them always distracted by toddlers running around, then you really need to find a way to have the toddlers in their own space where they can do their own thing, where they can color, where they can move around, do little action songs, and do things where they don't have to sit for long periods of time. So I just found that whenever I had toddlers in the classroom, and what I found too, that if I had a brother or sister, older brother or sister, saying, well, I have to look after my brother or sister, so they have to come into my class, I always say to them, it is better for you to go and sit in their class, because that way they get used to their class, and then you can maybe start slipping out to your own class once they get used to it, because they're nervous and afraid, and so they want you with them. And so I find that works the best. If you have the older child go into the younger child's class until they get used to it, and then, because if they take them in with them in their classroom, they're never going to get used to the younger classroom. And once they get in the younger classroom, if it's fun and they like it, they'll stay and they won't mind being alone after a while. So that's how I dealt with toddlers. I found it very difficult when I went up to northern Canada. I taught at Indian reservations up north in Canada. I went to about 6 of them. I had to fly into each one because they didn't have roads going into these reservations. But I found it very difficult because they would bring all of the children in, and I didn't have a lot of workers, and so I had a lot of the toddlers running around, and it was, I was just totally exhausted after I was finished teaching, because, because you just really couldn't do a whole lot because they were so distracted by the toddlers and the little ones running around. So that was difficult. So if you have that situation, I feel for you, because it is very hard when you have children running around and you're trying to teach a class. Okay. If you have space, like if you have Sunday school classes or you have a children's church area, when a child comes into a classroom, it can make a real difference if it looks bright and cheery. If it's just very dull and the walls are dull and everything, you have to work with what you have. But if it's possible for you to have this, then what I did in my classrooms is I decorated them. I just painted the walls. And this is not always possible, but you can also do paper, like large sheets of paper, and put these on the walls and just glue them or tape them to the walls. But rather than just have decorations, you can have like, round circles. You can just make out of paper, different colored paper, and put them on the wall. At least that's going to be bright, and even on just one wall. But other ways is you can do teaching walls where you put like this teaching tree here, which is Galatians 5:22, the fruits of the Spirit, and then you put all the different fruits with a different word on it for the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, all the fruits of the Spirit on there, and then you can go over it each week. That's a wonderful way for them to learn different Bible verses. And also you could put the books of the Bible, and then each week go over just you just put up sheets of paper with each book of the Bible on it. And that's one way that you can use your wall, and it'll be colorful, and you can practice the books of the Bible so they get used to what a Bible's all about and where the books are in the Bible. Or you can put the 10 Commandments and go through the 10 Commandments. But anyway, those are just things I did because I had a big classroom and I was able to do this kind of stuff. Having rules is a good thing, because if children don't know what the rules are, and they sometimes don't think there are any rules, and they just do as they please. So I found it very helpful to have rules and just say, these are the rules for our classroom. Like I just put up a sample of some of the things you could put up there. And I found that when I was teaching, that I was finding gum stuck under the seats each Sunday, where the kids were chewing gum and they would put it under their seat when they were finished, when it got stale. So I put "don't chew gum" in the classroom, just so I didn't have to clean that up all the time. Be kind to one another. Don't make fun of anybody. And participate in the songs and games. Obey your teachers and workers. Sit still during the lesson time. No talking during story time. Eyes closed during prayer. And no bathroom or drinks or drinks of water during the story time. I just found it helpful for them to know the rules, so that when they said, they wanted to do something that was against the rules, and just say, well, you know what the rules are. Now, so you can be a little flexible, but you need to try to have some rules that they know ahead of time. This is what you expect of them. Children don't mind that, and they don't mind it either if, in fact, I think there's a security in that, if they know the rules. And also, if they come into the classroom, if it's possible, I used to just play some nice, quiet children's music, because that sets the tone for the classroom. It settles them down, where they're not coming in, hey, let's go, we're going to have a party here, let's go, and they start running around, and it's so hard if that happens, to settle them down afterwards, because they're all round up and they're all having a good time, and then you say, sit down, be quiet, and if you just make some rules, have it very calm in your classroom, and you're ready to go. And if some of them come in, I find, excuse me, this is the way I would do it. When they come into the classroom, I have puzzles for them to do on paper or coloring paper. Now, in your packets that you receive from Agape Ministry Press, I know they have these things in there. They have little coloring pages, or they have puzzles, or something that goes along with the lesson, so that the children have, so if you can copy them off if you don't have enough, and then you can have them doing that when they first come in. So when they come in, hopefully you've got a place for them to sit, and a table to do this, where they can just do puzzles or coloring paper, because you don't want to start right away. They're coming early, and it gives them something to do, so they're not running around. And if you don't have that in your facilities, you can always do a game for the first ones that come in, just so that you don't have kids sitting around or running around when they first come into class. Something for them to do, that you're ready for them, and that your lesson is all ready, you have it all laid out and everything, so that you have that time even at the beginning. I found that sometimes at the beginning of class, if they were doing a puzzle at the table or coloring, and I would say, how is things going for you? Did you have a good week? What did you do? That let me know what was going on in that child's life. And sometimes they would open up to me if they were going through difficulties and things. So if you're not ready to teach and you're taking all that time when the kids are in there to get your lesson ready, you're missing a great opportunity to be able to minister to those kids. So then when I've finished the time of a puzzle or a coloring or whatever, or game at the beginning of class, when everybody's in, then I would start with prayer. And it's good to even have a child lead in prayer if they feel comfortable doing that. And then go over the rules of the class, because you're always going to have new ones, and the other kids that are come regularly, it still doesn't hurt them to hear the rules again. And then I start action songs where I, get them moving around a bit, so that they're not just sitting. So get them moving, and good action songs. And like I said, I'm going to do a lesson on songs, and I will be putting up some good songs on the website. Okay, then I would have, while I'm in the fun time, I always call the first part the kind of the fun time. And then I would have a game or a puppet that I would do. Sometimes I would do both. I would do a game and then maybe a puppet, depending on how much time I have. And the game or the puppet, it's nice if you can get it to go along with whatever your story is about. And then once you have done that, then I tell the children, okay, we've had all our fun stuff, and now we're going into the quiet time. So I let them know now there's a change. You've been, up and down, and we've had action songs, we've had fun games and everything. So I tell them now we're going into the quiet time. And so when I do that, I then start doing songs that are slower songs. And I find that if you have the children doing sign language with the songs, rather than just standing there singing, it helps to keep their attention. And the sign language is very simple to learn. And I'm going to teach that to you for two songs when we do the songs. And then, and it's easy to show the kids how to do it. All right, now, after I now have their attention, now one other thing, sorry I say now a lot or okay a lot, but anyway, when I go into the slow time and the lesson time, I always, or most times, I will have an incentive for them to be quiet. I will say, I want you all sitting up straight and tall because I have a treat for you afterwards. If, say, I have some cookies or something at the end of the program, I'll say, we're going to have treats after, so, if you want treats, you have to behave yourself and sit up straight and tall and be very quiet during this time. And, or else I'll have little candies. And I will say, sometimes if I'm in a large group, I will have somebody that goes around and puts a candy on the lap of a quiet child. That way they're being reminded the whole time that there is a treat for you that are sitting up straight and tall. So if you get a worker that can do that quietly, and every once I'll say now our worker today is going to watch you during the program, and if you're sitting really good, they're going to go and put a little candy in your lap. Now don't eat the candy then, you just keep it and don't play with it, just keep it or put it in your pocket. And then at the end of class you can eat that candy. Or you can just say, at the end I'm going to give the quietest kids a candy. Now that doesn't work for little children. Toddlers, you have to give everybody a treat. But the older children are learning in school and that not everybody wins a prize, not everyone gets, and I say to them, now you may have been really quiet and you're not getting a treat, but that's because we can't give it to everybody, but next week we'll be watching you again, and then you'll have a chance the next week to get a treat. Now, not everybody likes that way of doing things, but I found in very large classroom, when you have 200 children, that it was one way to get them to sit quietly and listen to the lesson. And then once I've got them quieted down, we have done a nice song like with the sign language. And you can just, when you are singing those songs, you know, you can just see. And if you're praying and asking God to touch those children, you can see He does that. And all of a sudden a real quietness comes over the classroom. And it is so much easier to teach a really good lesson when that quietness comes over the classroom. And then I would go into my Bible story, or whatever you have in your packet. If you have pictures, thank God for Agape Ministry Press sending you all of these wonderful pictures. But I am going to do a lesson on how to, if you don't have any pictures for, you know, for your lesson, that how you can do things that, you know, do object things that will teach a lesson and keep the kids, you know, attention, and how to do little drawings, you know, with the lesson, and so that, you know, that you're not just standing up there talking to them. So then after, and what I like too, if I'm doing a Bible story, I like to every once in a while take my Bible and show it to them. Or like if I'm telling a lesson and I've got the pictures there, every once in a while I'll pick up the Bible and, you know, like I'm reading out of the Bible, or sometimes I do read a line or two out of the Bible of that lesson, just so they know this lesson is not just a picture, this is coming from the Bible. You know, it wouldn't be good for you to stand up there and read the whole lesson from the Bible. Just because children, you won't keep their attention that long. So that's why, but I find that if I have pictures or whatever I'm doing, if I pick up the Bible and just read like a verse or something out of that lesson that I'm teaching, that is showing them this is where that story is coming from. Now the other thing, and in your lesson packets, I know that there are a lot of times there are what I would call application stories, where it's a story about a little boy or girl that went through a problem or whatever, and God helped them in that problem, like He did with, you know, one of the stories that you're telling. And so many of the materials have that sort of thing there. And they usually have pictures and things that go along with that story. And again, I have some ideas and things that I have used. If I found a really lovely story that went along with the lesson I was teaching, but I didn't have any pictures or anything, and I'll show you what I used instead that worked very, very well. In fact, some of the things I'm going to tell you work as well as having big pictures. And anyway, variety is the spice of life. So even, you know, these things, once in a while you can add these things to your lesson. And then after I have done the lesson and everything, then I have prayer with the kids, and maybe I'll have a slow song as well at the very end. And then I will have prayer, and then I many times will ask, if you have never asked Jesus into your heart, He loves you, and He, you know, and I just tell them a little bit about how to ask Jesus into your heart and what He did on the cross for us, and that He will, and like I said, sometimes you can just see God touching little children's hearts. It is so wonderful to see that. And then after that, I do the announcements for the next week. And then if I have some kind of goodie juice or cookies or whatever, especially if you have children's church, it's sometimes good to have that till the parents get out, you know, to have some kind of something like that. Okay, now this is things that I have learned too, is keep them busy and keep their attention at all times. Once you have their attention, don't lose it. You got to keep it. And again, I'm talking about large classrooms. If you have a small classroom and the kids are very well behaved, it's not a problem. But if you have a large classroom and you have a lapse of time where you're looking for things or where you're reading something, you will lose the kids. The other thing I would say is don't let other people come and go in your classroom, because sometimes adults will come in and and interrupt your class and start asking you questions. You need to kind of set rules there too. Like your workers, yes, they should be in your classroom, but anybody else, especially during the lesson time, when you want to teach a serious lesson to these kids, you don't want people coming and going in your classroom. So it is a good time, a good thing to just kind of tell people, unless it's something very, very important, don't come in and interrupt the class during this time. At the beginning of class, well, even then it's not good, but better than when you're getting into a good lesson. And because once you start talking to somebody else, when they've interrupted you and want to tell you something, those kids now are sitting there waiting for you to finish your conversation. So what do you think they're going to start doing? They're going to start talking, and they're going to start, and then when you come back again, you now have to get their attention all over again. And that's a hard thing to do when you're into the serious part of the lesson, because you got their attention in the fun part, okay? But now you're in the serious part, and it's much harder to get their attention back. And always be prepared before they arrive. Make sure you have everything set up. I'm going to tell you something. If you do this, it will make or break your class. Because if you are prepared and you have everything there, if you have a nice quiet atmosphere in there and you have some music playing, then that sets the whole tone, and you are now ready to go. You can talk to them when they start coming in. And because you're not worried, oh, I haven't got this ready, I got to go get this ready, and the child's asking you a question, oh, I'll talk to you later, I've got this to do, you've only got an hour. That's all God has given you this time, is 1 hour. You have 1 hour to reach those children for God. 1 hour out of a whole week to be able to minister to their needs and to teach them the Word of God. I believe that your ministry is every bit as important as any pastor, evangelist, prophet, anybody in the world, because you are planting seeds in children's lives. And that's why the one thing I forgot to say is I always have a memory verse, a Bible verse that goes along with the lesson. And I'm sure in your packets that you receive, there is the one Bible verse, the main Bible verse, that is what the lesson's all about. So that memory verse, if you can get, I believe that those children that came into our church from outside in unsaved homes and going through some tremendous hurts and problems, that those memory verses that we planted in their hearts, that the Holy Spirit, when they're older, can bring those memory verses back to their remembrance when they need it. So it is important to get some memory verses into them. That's why I like using a puppet who forgets the memory verse, and you have to tell them the memory verse, and then, okay, kids, let's say the memory verse so that the puppet can learn it. You are then having fun with them, but they are learning verses. Okay. And like I said before, once you get their attention, keep their attention. And don't ask a lot of questions of the kids. If you have a small class, fine. But when you have a large group, if you start asking the kids questions, unless they're the games, like if you're playing a game and, they have to know the answer to that question, then yes, you then have to. But don't just ask kids a question, because what can happen is a child can start talking way too long, and then the other kids are losing interest and you're losing them. So it's better, I found in large groups, not to ask questions unless it was questions about the games and they were answering them. And if they want to ask you questions about God or whatever, then you need to say, after the lesson today, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, because you just don't want to do that in the middle of your lesson. And watch the kids, see if they're getting restless. Okay, so if you're watching the kids while you're teaching, and you know your lesson well, you don't have to read it off a paper or a book, and so you're watching the kids, you're interacting with them in that story and watching them, and you're getting eye contact with them. And that way you can tell when they're starting to get restless and they're starting to, you can tell that they're losing interest. So that helps you to gauge on how long your lesson time should be. Because if you start losing them, they're going to start talking to one another, and then you've lost them, and then it's better to make your lesson shorter and to the point than it is to drag it out too long. So watch them, and that'll tell you whether, if you're watching the children, you can tell what they're receiving too, whether this lesson is really touching them, and so it's really good to watch the kids. And if you're going to get somebody else to help you to teach part of the lesson, make sure they're not boring. Have you ever been in a meeting? I know you've been in a meeting where it is so boring, and you are sitting there thinking about everything else but what this pastor or this speaker is saying, because you're trying to hear them, but it's boring. Now, I know you've all experienced that. And so that's the same as kids. Don't bore them with the gospel of Jesus Christ, because you can make your lessons enjoyable, and so if you have somebody else coming in and they're going to teach part of the lesson, and you can see, I always say to them, I'll give you 10 minutes. And a lot of times what I will do is get them to do some of the fun stuff first to see if they're going to be able to interact with kids okay. Because I don't want them coming in doing a serious part of the lesson and they're going to go on and on and on. Same as people that pray, These are kids. You can't have kids sitting there for 10 minutes while somebody is praying. They are not going to sit there for 10 minutes while somebody's praying unless the Holy Spirit is touching them. That's the difference. But don't get somebody that's going to go on for 10 minutes in a prayer for little children. Make sure that everything is done is to the point, and so anything that you have anybody else doing, make sure that they're not boring and that they don't take too long. I've done a lot of ladies' meetings too, and I've been to Israel, and I had a lot of slides and pictures and everything from Israel. So every once in a while, I would do in my group, I would do a teaching on Israel and how it applies to prophecy and stuff like that, and the second coming and all of that. And anyway, somebody said, oh, this other gal's was to Israel, and so, maybe you could use her. So I thought, oh, well, okay. So I asked her to do, I talked to her, and she was telling me about her experience in Israel and everything. And so I thought, okay. So I said to her, I will give you 20 minutes to talk. And I said, please don't take any longer than that. And I stressed that with her, because I had a feeling she might be one that would want to, take over and talk a while. So I kept saying 20 minutes. And so when she got up there and she's going on and she's telling stuff about her experience of how she saw a little cat in the little alleyway, and how, going on about stuff had nothing to do. And I'm going, oh God, what do I do here? And so finally, I took my hand when she was going over the 20 minutes, and I knew, this is boring, so I took my hand and I put it up and I pointed at the watch, and I made sure she saw me pointing at my watch. And she ignored me. And I went, and I kept pointing at my watch. And so finally, she looked at me and says, "Do you want me to stop?" Says it in front of all these ladies, Must have had about 50 ladies. And I said, "Yes, please. I have things that I have to do." And so she didn't like me after that, But you can't let people take over. So same thing with kids. Don't let somebody take over, and because you only have an hour. That's all you've got with the kids. Okay, and again, reward for good behavior. I like to do that rather than be yelling at them all the time. Sit down, be quiet, don't do that, don't run around. Hey, Johnny, don't do that. If you're going to, what a waste of time the whole time spending getting after the kids. So that's why I find having some kind of a reward for good behavior is good, but don't overdo treats either, where you're just giving them out all the time. Then they're not treats, they're not special. Okay, and I did that other one already. So this is about the teachers. I'm sorry we're going over a bit, but hopefully you'll bear with me. This is about you as a teacher. Show the kids that you're worth listening to. Like, if you are prepared and you are ready and you know in your heart, and you will know in your heart whether you have prepared, whether you are prayed up for those kids, and whether you've done your best to get that lesson together, and that it will be good, and that you're ready ahead of time. So when you start, it'll take only a few minutes for those kids to know if you're worth listening to. And if you get up there and you're boring and you're taking time and you're not, then you're going to lose them and you're going to have a hard time getting them back. So that's why when I start out, I try to right away do an exciting song, and they're saying, "Hey, this is fun, like this is going to be worth being here." And if you show them that you care about them and that you're really invested in them, they've got your attention. They want your attention. And if you're doing everything else, they're going to start doing things to get your attention, and you're not going to like it. Okay, and also use expressions. Don't be boring. Say, "Man, look what happened there in this Bible story. Wow, can you imagine that? That, a whale swallowed Jonah, look at how God used this man of God. Look at how God took Daniel out of the lion's den, and, be expressive, these are wonderful stories. I'm going to tell you something. All the cartoons and everything else that the world has out there is nothing compared to the stories in the Word of God, and they are true. And that's what you need to stress with them. This stuff is real. This really happened. And then, like I said, don't read from a book. Look at the children while you're teaching. Get to the point, and don't drag out the lesson. Don't use less words, and don't use adult words. I've never had a problem with that because I don't have a large vocabulary. So I can easily use simple language. So don't use, words think about the words you're saying. Do the children understand these words? So make them simple. And that's the same thing I'm going to cover with music. Make sure that whatever songs you're singing with the kids, they understand the meaning of them. Because many kids are just doing adult songs and they have no idea. Make sure that, and I'll cover that anyway. And always let your yes be yes and your no's be no. If you say to the kids, if you don't quiet down, we're not going to have this treat or this game or whatever, and they don't settle down, you do it in a nice way. I always say, "Oh, I'm sorry, kids. I really wanted to do this game with you today. It's such a good game, but I told you that if you weren't quiet and good, that I just couldn't do it." And you watch the kids when they realize that, they'll start telling the other kids, "Shh, be quiet. Because, they want, if it's something they really want, they will settle down. Okay, and don't have favorite kids. Don't show favoritism because it's easier to love some kids than other ones. It's harder to love the ones that act up and have problems, but they're the ones that need you more than the good, well-behaved kids. So don't have favorites. Don't show favoritism because that's hurting some of the other kids. Treat them all the same. They're all God's creation and He loves every single one of them. So love the kids. Your love and kindness to them will teach a great lesson. Just being kind to them doesn't mean you don't get after them, because when they need it, they know it. You and I both know when we were kids, when we did something wrong, we knew it. And so do they. And so it doesn't hurt to get after them, but do it in a loving way. And it teaches volumes to the kids. If you've had a loving teacher through your childhood, then you know what an impression they made upon you. So anyway, that's pretty well um, my presentation today. And I hope that you have learned some lessons. And I know some of these things won't apply to you because you don't have the facilities, but whatever you can get from it that will help you with your class. And don't feel bad if you haven't done a lot of these things, because that's why you're here. You're learning how to be effective as a teacher. So just use the things that I have learned. And again, if you have a small class, you don't have to worry quite so much. But if you have large groups, then these things will be very, very helpful to you. So anyway, thank you for joining me again. And like I said, I hope you've learned something, and I will